How's it going, everybody? Daner here with North Central Coins, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the most rare and valuable coins in Canada. Today, we're going to be taking a look at 7 legendary Canadian coins that you could actually find by searching through your pocket change. These coins are so rare and valuable that they have become pure numismatic legends. And believe it or not, there is still a small chance that you could come across one of these hiding in the wilds of circulation today. In today's video, we will go through and break down each of these one-of-a-kind pieces and discuss what it is that makes them so valuable and legendary in the world of Canadian coin collecting. Before we do get into this, I would really appreciate if you guys would smash that thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and also ring that bell notification so you can stay up to date on all my latest content. And then, without any further ado, what do you say we get right into it and discuss the 7 most legendary Canadian coins that you could actually find in your pocket change. Let's get it, guys. The transition of Canadian quarters from nickel alloy to multiply plated steel in the years 1999 and 2000 was a significant change in the production of Canada's circulating coinage. The switch was primarily driven by cost savings and the need for more durable coins. I'm going to give you guys a quick breakdown of this process so you can understand how this Holy Grail 2000 P Caribou Quarter came into existence. There were several reasons and motivations for the Canadian Mint switching from the nickel alloy to the multiply plated steel. The first was cost savings. The Canadian Mint sought ways to reduce the production cost of coinage. Nickel, which had traditionally been a key component of Canadian coins, was becoming increasingly expensive. Also, durability. There was a strong desire to produce more durable coins. Canadian coins, especially the smaller denominations, were susceptible to wear and tear due to their softer nickel composition. Research and development. Prior to the transition, the Canadian Mint conducted extensive research and development to identify alternative materials that would meet the criteria of cost effectiveness and durability. The choice of multiply plated steel was a result of this research. The material offered a combination of durability and cost savings. Multiply plated steel is a composite material composed of several layers. The outer layers are typically made of steel, which is a hard and durable metal. The steel layers are then plated with a thin layer of other metals such as nickel or copper to provide the coins with their desired appearance and properties. These coins then go through design and testing phases. The new quarters were designed to look similar to the old nickel alloy quarters to ensure easy recognition and acceptance by the public. Extensive testing was conducted to ensure that the multiply plated steel quarters met the required quality and durability standards. These included tests for wear resistance, corrosion resistance, and overall coin longevity. The transition from nickel alloy to multiply plated steel coinage took place over a period of several years. New dies and machinery were put into place to accommodate this new coin material. The existing nickel alloy quarters remain in circulation and can still be found in your pocket change to this day. The minting process for multiply plated steel coinage is similar to that of traditional coin production, involving blanking and nailing, upsetting, striking, and inspection. However, the materials used in the blanks are different, with the new multiply plated steel blanks replacing the old traditional nickel alloy blanks. The Canadian Mint worked diligently to ensure that the public was aware of the change in coin material. They also coordinated with banks and financial institutions and vending machine companies to ensure a smooth transition and exchange of old nickel alloy quarters for the new multiply plated steel ones. This switch to multiply plated coinage was successful and reduced production costs for the Canadian Mint. It did also result in more durable coins that were better equipped to withstand the wear and tear of circulation. The transition did not significantly impact the appearance or functionality of the coins, so it was generally well received by the public. Now, the existence of this incredibly rare 2000 P Caribou Quarter in Canada is indeed an intriguing numismatic mystery. While the Canadian Mint switched from the nickel alloy to multiply plated steel quarters between the years 1999 and 2000, the accidental release of only a few 2000 P Caribou quarters featuring a P mint mark on the obverse under the Queen's bust to indicate that it was composed of multiply plated steel still remains a puzzling anomaly to this day. Now here's an explanation of how a few examples of this coin may have made their way into circulation. It could have been an accidental die mix-up. The most plausible explanation for the existence of these 2000 P Caribou Quarters is that there was an accidental mix-up of the coin dies during the minting process. Die mix-ups can occur in a minting facility where the wrong set of dies is used to strike a batch of coins. In this case, it would have involved the use of dies meant for 1999 or 2001 P quarters instead of the correct 2000 dies. Now, each coin die has a different year assigned to it and are prepared and stored separately in the minting facility. Each die has specific designs for each year and denomination, including the image of Queen Elizabeth II for the obverse and usually the caribou design for the reverse. Due to this mix-up, a small batch of the 2000 Caribou Quarters would have been struck with the incorrect 1999 test token dies or the future 2001 P dies that they were planning on using the following year, which featured the caribou design on the reverse. The rest of the 2000 quarters would have been struck using the correct 2000 dies. Quality control procedures and minting facilities are designed to catch errors, but they are not foolproof. In this case, an oversight likely occurred during the quality control checks. Some of the coins produced with the incorrect dies may have passed inspection due to the similarities in size and composition to the regular quarters. After minting, the coins are typically transported to financial institutions for distribution. If any of the 2000 P Caribou Quarters passed quality control checks, they would have entered the regular circulation stream like any other quarter. Now, another large possibility is that some of these quarters may have made their way into pocket change or circulation from being issued to vending machine companies. To ensure a smooth transition and to avoid disruptions in vending machines and coin-operated devices that accept quarters, the Canadian Mint needed to guarantee that the new multiply-plated coinage would be compatible with these machines. To test the compatibility of the new quarters with vending machines, the Canadian Mint produced a batch of test coins or test tokens with the new composition. These test coins were initially struck with the same design as regular quarters to resemble the appearance of circulating currency. Eventually, the Canadian Mint distributed these coins to vending machine manufacturers and companies that operated vending machines across Canada. The companies used these test coins or tokens to calibrate their vending machines and ensure that they would accept the new quarters without issue. So it is definitely possible that some of the 2000 P Caribou Quarters could have made their way into the hands of vending machine companies who could have then held onto them or then passed them down to relatives. Now that you guys have some information on how this coin came into existence, to identify it, basically it looks the same as just about any other regular Canadian quarter. It has the caribou on the reverse, but if you flip it over to the obverse, you want to look for a little P mark or mint mark under the Queen's bust to indicate that it is made of multiply plated steel. If you can find this mint mark on a 2000 reverse Canadian quarter, then you have yourself a holy grail coin. Now, from the information that I came across, currently there are only 2 known examples of the 2000 P Caribou Quarter, and you can get around $36,300 for an MS65 example. So if you did find one of these and it was all beat up, worn, and been through the meat grinder, so even at the very bottom of the Sheldon scale, you can still expect to get a couple $100 or maybe even a couple $1,000 for this coin because it is so rare and there are so few of them that exist. And even though it may seem highly unlikely that you could ever stumble across one of these coins, crazier things have happened. I have met coin roll hunters that have had some crazy finds. I'm talking entire boxes of silver quarters and even better. So always keep your eyes open because you never know what you can find in your pocket change. So first, let's give you guys some information so you have some context on how this coin came into existence. In the year 1967, the rising price of silver forced a reduction in the silver content in Canadian 10 and 25 cent coins from 80% to 50% composition, although some coins were still minted in 80% during that year. 1967 and 1968 are considered transitional years for the amount of silver commonly used in Canadian coins, and the composition was eventually changed to pure nickel in the year 1968, with around a third of the dimes and quarters being composed of 50% silver for that final year. The transition from silver to nickel composition in Canadian coins during the years 1967 and 1968 was a significant change in the country's currency. This shift marked a move towards a more cost-effective and durable material for coin production. This ultimately impacted the value and collectability of these coins for numismatists. This was a very experimental and tumultuous time at the Canadian Mint, and there was also a very heavy workload as the full run of 1967 commemorative coins was no doubt a huge undertaking in the years prior, and working during this time must have been a strain on Mint employees. To help relieve some of this pressure, some of the Canadian 10-cent coins produced in the year 1968 were actually struck at the Philadelphia Mint in the United States. These are distinguishable from the Canadian dimes by looking at the width of the grooves along the outside reading of the coin. The dimes struck in the United States will have wider and more squared notches, and the Canadian dimes will be more narrow and angled. The Philadelphia dimes are considered to be the more rare of the two varieties, but neither the silver nor nickel 1968 dimes are exceptionally valuable. However, in the year 1969, a production mishap occurred during the creation of the Canadian dimes, resulting in an error in the matrices. By mistake, a portion of the coins produced had the large date feature instead of the intended small date. Since multiple coins are struck simultaneously by various machines, a mixture of both large date and small date coins emerged. Presently, there are around 20 confirmed instances of these error coins, but it is believed that there are still around 20 to 30 out in circulation that remain undiscovered. To identify this coin, you have to look at the date on the reverse of the coin. I will show an example of what both the small and large dates look like, but what I highly suggest is that if you find a Canadian dime from the year 1968, hold on to it, because the date on the 1968 dime was only struck in the large size and the size of the numerals was reduced the following year, or at least so we thought. So if you compare the size of the date on your 1969 dime and the size looks similar to the date on the 1968, then you may have yourself a holy grail coin. The examples of this coin that have been discovered are usually not in the greatest condition and at best are barely pushing mint state. If you're ever to find a legitimate example of one of these and it's scored higher in the MS range, it could easily be one of the most valuable Canadian coins of all time. Though there are only few known examples, it is very rare that an actual estimate exists for the amount of holy grail coins that could still be found floating around in the wilds of circulation. And this is one where if you hunt dimes regularly, you can definitely validate the lack of other good stuff to look for. So now that we've given you some information on how this coin came into existence and how to identify it, what do you say we discuss the specifications and potential value? The specifications of the 1969 large date dime should be exactly the same as the 1969 small date, except for the size of the numerals on the date. It is composed of 100% nickel. It has a weight of 2.07 grams, a diameter of 18.03 millimeters, a thickness of 1.16 millimeters. The obverse was designed by Arnold Mockin and Myron Cook. The reverse was designed by Emmanuel Hahn and Myron Cook. The edge of the coin is reeded, it is magnetic, and the die axis is in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian coins. So let's get into the values for the 1969 large date dime. First, just to give you an idea in comparison, the highest graded known example of the 1969 currently is an AU50, which is just before the MS mark. As I mentioned earlier, if you were to find one of these and it did score anywhere in the mid-MS range, this would be an incredibly rare and valuable Canadian dime that could easily be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And one of the best things about this 1969 large date dime is it is not actually that old. I have found 1970 nickels, dimes, quarters that are in a high mint state, so your chance of being able to find one of these and it's in decent condition aren't the worst ever. Hopefully someone didn't find one of these and bash it with a hammer not knowing what it is, but you never know. To find one of these, even at the absolute bottom of the Sheldon scale, would be a nice little treat. So just to give you guys an idea of value, the 1969 small date can be worth up to 20 cents for an AU50, which is 2 times its face value. It can be worth a couple dollars when it starts to hit the MS region. It can be worth $10, $20 when it starts to hit around an MS 65. Now, when it comes to the 1969 large date, on the very bottom end of the Sheldon scale, it is worth $11,300 for an F12. So that is not the absolute bottom. The absolute bottom of the Sheldon scale is an about good or a good, which is a 3 or 4 out of the 70-point system. But an F12 is still pretty low, not the greatest shape ever, that is for sure, and you're still getting over $10,000 for this dime. Now, on the high end, one of the highest graded known examples is an AU50, and it can be worth around $21,200 for an AU50 example. And as I mentioned earlier on, it is estimated that somewhere around 20 or 30 of these are still floating around in the wilds of circulation. So I suggest that you guys, if you have your piggy banks, you go bust it open, look through your dimes, because if you were to find one of these and it has been through the meat grinder, you can still make over $10,000. So definitely a good one to have on your radar and to keep your eyes out for, whether you're sifting through your pocket change or you are coin roll hunting. In the year 1996, the Royal Canadian Mint changed the composition of Canadian 1-cent coins due to the increasing price of copper. They started testing new coins made of steel and using a new production method called multiply plating, which combines nickel and copper layers over a steel core. This method was also used for coins in other countries. The Royal Canadian Mint is innovative and offers a solution to save money without compromising quality. Coins produced with this method had a P added below the Queen's bust from the year 2001 to 2006, which was later replaced by the Royal Canadian Mint logo in the year 2006. The Canadian Mint also adapted this new technique for producing coins for various foreign countries, including Papua New Guinea, New Zealand, Ghana, Oman, Paraguay, Barbados, the Bahamas, and even more. This technique has several advantages, such as saving time and materials by using less nickel, copper, or bronze than other minting techniques. It is also faster than single ply plating. Additionally, nickel plate resists tarnishing better than cupronickel and ferritic stainless steel. The multiply plating technique also provides heightened security by customizing the thickness of each copper and nickel layer to create a unique electromagnetic signature, which prevents vending machine fraud. So between the years of 2000 and 2006, it was quite an experimental time at the Royal Canadian Mint for Canadian pennies, and because of this, 6 different varieties were actually created for the Canadian 2006 penny, and amongst those, there is a Holy Grail penny that can be worth crazy amounts of money. In the past, I've discussed some of the Holy Grail coins that have been discovered or that you can actually find, but there are a few modern coins that are as rare and valuable as the 2006 P non-magnetic Canadian penny. The thing about this coin is that you actually have a decent chance of finding one of them if you hunt pennies regularly. I have actually heard of Canadian coin roll hunters stumbling upon this rare gem. It is honestly one of the most well-known and looked for pennies in Canada that you actually have a decent chance of finding eventually. In terms of its scarcity, this penny actually reminds me a lot to the 1922 to 1925 George V pennies. These pennies, although extremely rare and hard to come by, are not impossible to find, and even in low-grade examples of both the 2006 P non-magnetics and also some of the early 1920s small pennies, they can all be worth minimum of $20 to $30, even at the bottom of their grading tier. So very similar values and scarcity for these Canadian pennies. So stay tuned, because I'm definitely going to be making some videos in the future on those early 1920s Canadian small cents. They can be worth just absolutely insane money. But what do you say we discuss the values and specifications of these 2006 Canadian pennies? Because as I mentioned, there are 6 different varieties, and some of them can be worth some okay money, some of them can be worth pretty much face value, and some of them can be worth a whole heck of a lot of money. And I'm also going to talk briefly about an extremely valuable 2005 Canadian penny out of a proof set that you should definitely have on your radar as well. So let's get into the values of these coins. I'm going to start with these 2005s because they're actually a little bit easier. Now, in terms of value, the 2005s are not too rare or too valuable, at least to find the business strikes or circulation examples. But there exists an extremely rare and valuable variety for the 2005 Canadian pennies, and it is actually a proof strike, and that is the 2005 P non-magnetic Canadian proof penny. Now, just to give you guys an idea of the values of the 2005 Canadian pennies, the 2005 regular Canadian proof strike, so no P mint mark, is worth around $1.95 for a PL64 example, and can be worth around $40 for a PL67. The 2005 P from the proof sets, the magnetic example, is worth around $1.45 for a PL64 and can be worth all the way up to $32.90 for a PL67. And then we have the 2005 P non-magnetic. Now this thing is a holy grail. Your chance of finding it in a coin roll hunt is pretty much slim to nil, but never say never. I have seen much crazier things happen. Your best chance of finding one of these 2005 P non-magnetic Canadian proof pennies is to carry a magnet around with you, go to coin shops, flea markets, maybe check Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji and look for 2005 Canadian proof sets with P mint marks. And basically you just got to throw that magnet onto the penny, and if it doesn't stick to the penny, you might have a holy grail coin that can be worth $1,150 for a PL64 and all the way up to $3,250 $290 for a PL67. This is one of the holy grails of the modern Canadian pennies. There were very few examples struck, so definitely keep your eyes out for 2005P proof sets. And if you have a magnet with you, maybe just give that penny a little tap, and if it doesn't stick, then you might have a jackpot on your hands. All right, so what do you say we start going through the 2006 pennies? I'm going to discuss the compositions as well as some of the identifying factors of these pennies, so that way you can find the ones that are worth good money, because there are two of the 2006 pennies that can be extremely rare and valuable. So the first one that we are going to discuss is not going to be one of the rare ones, and that is the 2006 with a P mint mark, and this is a magnetic example. So to identify this, you want to flip over to the obverse and look for a little P mint mark under the bust of the queen. It will also have a magnetic steel planchette. Now, in terms of value, it's worth around 5 cents for an MS60, so pretty much worth face value at the bottom of the MS scale, maybe slightly more. And this one can be worth $73.70 for an MS67 example, which is an extremely high grade example. Now, next up, we're actually going to discuss the rarest and most valuable of the 2006 Canadian pennies, and that is the 2006P non-magnetic. So basically, to identify this one, you want to flip over to the obverse of the coin and look for a little P mint mark under the bust of the queen. This coin will have a non-magnetic copper planchette. Now, one of the great things about the rare 2006 pennies that also makes them one of the most searched for pennies here in Canada when it comes to coin roll hunting is that they actually have a pretty decent value on the low end. Now, the 2006P non-magnetic can be worth around $40 for a VF12, so that is pretty much at the bottom of the Sheldon scale. Even if it is absolutely beat up, sat in a parking lot, you're going to be getting $10 or $20 for this coin. People want them for their collection, and even though they are out there, they are honestly a unicorn, and you almost never stumble across them. So as I mentioned, this 2006P non-magnetic can be worth around $40 for a VF example. It can be worth $132 for an almost uncirculated 50. And then on the high end, it can be worth $500 for an MS60 and all the way up to $2,000 for an MS65. This is a fairly recent penny. I have found coins much older in a high mint state before, so your chances of finding one of these and it actually being in decent condition is not too terrible, honestly. So always keep your eyes out for the 2006 pennies and throw your 2006 Ps to the side. Check them with the magnet, and if that magnet does not stick, then you have yourself one extremely rare coin. Now, next we'll get into the 2006s with the Royal Canadian Mint logo. Now, there is a non-magnetic and a magnetic. Neither of these are particularly rare or valuable. The first we will discuss is the 2006 non-magnetic with the Royal Canadian Mint logo under the bust. To identify it, you want to flip over to the obverse, look for the Royal Canadian Mint logo under the Queen's bust, and this will have a non-magnetic copper planchette. In terms of value, it's worth around 10 cents for an MS60, and it can be worth up to $45.30 for an MS67, which is an extremely high grade. And then we have the 2006 Royal Canadian Mint logo with a magnetic planchette. To identify this, you want to flip over to the obverse, look for that Royal Canadian Mint logo under the Queen's bust. It will have a magnetic steel planchette, and it can be worth around $1.95 for an MS60 and around $177 for an MS67. So this is definitely the rare of the two varieties, and it may be a good idea to pull a few of these to the side if you're a coin roll hunter. The 2006 Royal Canadian Mint magnetic seems to be the rare and more valuable of the two. And the last two varieties for the Canadian 2006 pennies that we are going to discuss today are the 2006s without any mint marks. Now, just like the previous four pennies mentioned, there is a magnetic and non-magnetic example for the 2006 Canadian penny with no mint mark. The rare one of the two is the 2006 magnetic. First, we'll discuss the 2006 non-magnetic. Now, to identify this, you want to flip over to the obverse of the coin, and there will be no P or no logo of the Royal Canadian Mint mark under the Queen's bust, and it will also have a non-magnetic copper planchette. In terms of value, it's worth around 5 cents for an MS60 example, and can be worth around $47 for an MS67. So very similar prices on the high end for the more common of the 2006 coins. And then we have the second of the Holy Grail 2006 pennies, and that is the 2006 magnetic no mint mark. Now, to identify this, you want to flip over to the obverse of the coin, and you are looking for no mint mark under the Queen's bust. It will have a magnetic steel planchette. Now, it was not made in sets, it was only released in circulation. I have still yet to find either of these two of the rare 2006 pennies, but I shall keep looking and maybe, just maybe, I will have my day. In terms of value, the 2006 magnetic no mint mark can be worth around $75 for an MS60 and all the way up to $863 for an MS67. This one isn't super valuable on the low end. It can be worth around $10 to $20. If it's in a low grade state, people still really want it for their collections. And because you almost never stumble across these things in the wild, people are always willing to pay a premium to add them to their collection. If you ever did find one of these, I would suggest trying to sell it on maybe eBay or Facebook Marketplace. That's usually where you get the most amount of money for these coins. You can maybe try taking it to your local coin shop, but they're usually not interested in varieties like this. They might pay you like a couple dollars or something like that if you're lucky. But your best bet for coins like this is to sell it on eBay or maybe an online auction to get the premium that you are hoping for. During the year 1967, the rising price of silver forced a reduction in the silver content in Canadian 10 and 25 cent coins from 80% to 50%, although some coins were still minted in 80% during 1967. The two different compositions of the Canadian 1967 coins are not distinguishable by eye. 1967 and 1968 are transitional years for the amount of silver commonly used in Canadian coins, and the composition was eventually changed to pure nickel in the year 1968, with around a third of the dimes and quarters being produced and composed of 50% silver for that final year. The transition from silver to nickel composition in Canadian coins during the years 1967 and 1968 was a significant change in the country's currency. This shift marked a move towards a more cost-effective and durable material for coin production, ultimately impacting the value and collectability of these coins for numismatists. In the year 1967, the Canadian Mint made commemorative designs for each of the different denominations, and although they are incredibly beautiful and the dimes and quarters are silver, they usually aren't worth too much money. But believe it or not, there is an incredibly rare dime that has flown under the radar of most collectors, and it is found on the 1967 Mackerel Dime. In the year 1967, the Canadian Mint began preparations for the switch to the nickel composition for its coinage the following year. This was a very experimental time at the Canadian Mint, and there was also a heavy workload as the full run of 1967 commemorative coinage was no doubt a huge undertaking at the time, and some of the coins in the series, such as the Rock Dove penny, had very large mintage figures, so it would have definitely been a strain on mint employees. Now, let's briefly discuss pattern or trial coins. Most pattern essays or trial coins were not officially approved for release, but produced to evaluate a proposed coin design, a new or revised coinage, or to test the metal composition, dies, or structure of a new coin. And when it comes to pattern trial and essay coins, usually there will only be a few known examples of the piece, if any, and they usually don't leave the mint facility unless intended, and they are quickly snatched up, graded, and accounted for. I don't want to say that there's a 0% chance that you will ever stumble across one of these in the wild, but if you were, it would definitely be a gift from the coin gods. The thing that makes this coin great, as opposed to some other errors and varieties, is how easy it would be to identify. Silver coins are non-magnetic and nickel coins will stick to a magnet. The thing that makes this 1967 Mackerel trial piece so special is that it is actually composed of nickel instead of all the other Mackerel dimes, which were made of silver that year. This is most likely the result of experimentation by the Canadian Mint to test nickel planchettes, or maybe they planned on releasing some of the commemorative coins in nickel as well, but regardless, it's another great legendary coin to have on your radar. If you do ever happen to have a 1967 Mackerel dime that appears like it may not be silver or has a more dull tone, all you have to do is hit it with a magnet, and if it sticks, you have one of the rarest Canadian dimes in existence. Another identifying factor that makes this coin different from its silver counterparts is its weight. This nickel planchette pattern will weigh 2.1 grams, and the silver mackerels should weigh 2.33 grams. There are actually a few other similar cases of coins where the Canadian Mint will experiment and these holy grail pieces are born. One other good example would be the 1967 Bobcat Quarter, which is pretty much the exact same case as this dime. It was a pattern or trial piece struck on a nickel planchette, and it can be worth some really good money as well. Some of the details and specifications for this coin: the overall mintage for the 1967 Mackerel Dime is 32,309,135. The trial pattern piece is composed of 99% nickel. It has a weight of 2.1 grams, a diameter of 18.03 millimeters. It is magnetic. The face value is 10 cents and it is in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian coins. Now that we've discussed some of the history and how to identify this coin, what do you say we get into the value of this extremely rare piece of Canadian numismatic history? If you were to ever send this coin in to be graded, it would be classified as a specimen and get an SP designation, as that is the designation most Canadian pattern or trial coins will receive. So as I mentioned earlier on, there are only a few known examples currently for this coin. If you were to find one and it scored an SP63, it would be worth around $3,000. It can be worth around $4,000 for an SP64, and this bad boy can be worth all the way up to $5,000 for an SP65, which, as far as I can tell, is the highest graded known example currently. If you were to ever find one and it scored any higher, you would probably see some pretty big price jumps, and I would not doubt that the price of this coin starts to double, and if it hits around an SP67, it could easily be worth anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000. So even though there is not too many of these known to exist, and very few of them probably left the mint facility, it is definitely still a good one to have on your radar. I have found 1967 Mackerel Dimes coin roll hunting and in my pocket change before. They are still out there in the wild, and you can definitely fish them out if you keep your eyes open. The 1967 Canadian Bobcat Quarter is a remarkable coin for collectors, not only for its stunning design by renowned Canadian artist Alex Colville, but also for the fascinating minting era that led to the creation of the extremely rare nickel versions. Originally, the entire mintage run of the 1967 Bobcat Quarters was intended to be struck in either 50% silver and 50% copper, or 80% silver and 20% copper, or 0.50 and 0.80. This adjustment in the metal composition was part of a broader effort by the Canadian Mint to prepare for a transition to nickel coinage, which aimed at reducing the cost of producing higher denomination coins for the dimes, quarters, half dollars, and silver dollars. However, during this busy period, which involved the production of commemorative coins for Canada's centennial, a small batch of nickel planchettes, which were typically reserved for the future coin denominations, were accidentally used to strike some of these 25-cent Bobcat quarters. This mix-up resulted in the creation of one of the rarest Canadian coins in existence, the 1967 nickel Bobcat Quarter. Numismatists believe that only 5 to 10 examples of this extremely rare coin still exist, making it an extraordinarily sought-after item for collectors. A certified example of one of these, graded SP64, which is Specimen 64 by PCGS, sold in auction for a staggering $3,000 in the year 2019, solidifying its status as one of Canada's most valuable heir coins. Now, given this piece's extreme rarity, knowing how to identify one of these coins is incredibly important if you want to be able to make the big bucks. So here's what you should look for. First, you want to perform the magnet test. The simplest and most effective way to determine whether you have a nickel or silver 1967 Bobcat Quarter is to perform a magnet test. Silver is non-magnetic, so if your 1967 Bobcat Quarter does not stick to a magnet, you likely have a silver version. Now, on the other hand, if the 1967 Bobcat Quarter sticks to the magnet, it is likely the extremely rare nickel version of this coin. You also want to look for visual differences. Nickel coins tend to have a duller appearance compared to their silver counterparts. The silver Bobcat Quarters, whether they're 50 or 80% silver, generally exhibit a more lustrous or shiny finish, especially in higher grade or well-preserved states. The nickel version of this coin, by contrast, may appear more dull and lack the same level of reflection that is characteristic of the silver coins. This very subtle difference in appearance can provide additional clues when identifying one of these coins. You then also want to do the weight test. While this might not be immediately obvious to the naked eye, the difference in metal composition between nickel and silver affects the weight of this coin. A 1967 quarter made of silver will actually weigh slightly more than the rare nickel version. If you have a scale, compare the weight of your Bobcat quarter to the standard weights for a silver version, and if there is a difference in weights, then you may have the rare version. I will actually go over the exact weights of the silver and nickel versions later on in this video. You can also perform a ping test. For silver Bobcat quarters, distinguishing between the 50 and 80% silver versions is a bit tricky. One tried and true method is the ping test, which involves gently tapping the coin to produce a sound. Silver coins emit a clear, ringing tone when they are struck, and the pitch may vary slightly depending on the silver content of the coin. The higher silver content in the 80% quarters should produce a longer, more resonant ping compared to the 50% silver variety, which may produce a slightly duller or short tone. Collectors will often use this method as an alternative to using expensive silver testing machines. Now you can also get your coin professionally tested. If you're serious about determining whether you have a nickel Bobcat quarter, and if you want to know the exact silver composition of one of your 1967 regular silver Bobcat quarters, a more definitive option is to use a precious metal testing machine. These devices, typically used by professional coin graders or bullion dealers, can accurately determine the metal composition for your coin. However, these machines are quite expensive, which makes them impractical for casual collectors. For anybody that finds one of these rare coins and is wondering where to sell it, or they can get it identified or appraised, one thing you can do is look up your local coin shops in your area and maybe take it in and get an opinion. I wouldn't do this for any coin that you find, but if you find something that you believe is truly a holy grail, then it probably is worth getting a second opinion, because you don't want to accidentally throw something that's worth thousands of dollars back into the wilds of circulation. Beyond the intrigue of this rare minting error, the 1967 Canadian Centennial coins are highly significant in Canadian history. They're created in celebration of Canada's 100th anniversary of Confederation. The government commissioned special designs for each of the denominations, from the penny all the way through to the silver dollar. The eventual designs were the result of an open competition to Canadian artists with the intent of showcasing national pride and the country's natural wildlife. Alex Colville, a renowned artist from Sackville, New Brunswick, was chosen to design all 6 of the 1967 reverse designs. Each design featured a different Canadian animal, which symbolized the natural beauty and strength of our country. The bobcat, which was featured on the 25-cent coin, is meant to embody agility, independence, and fierceness. The obverse of this coin retains the familiar portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, which was designed by Arnold Machen. The combination of Alex Colville's wildlife depictions with Arnold Machen's regal portrait creates a coin that remains beloved by collectors, not just for its beauty, but for its deep historical meaning. Because of the extremely limited number of these 1967 nickel Bobcat quarters in existence, these coins are considered the holy grail for many coin collectors. Even for those who don't possess the nickel version, the 1967 silver Bobcat quarter still remains a fairly decent find due to its connection with Canada and also its silver content. Even if you do happen to find one of these silver 1967 Bobcat quarters in your pocket change, I would still definitely hold on to it, because silver coins are generally worth more than their clad counterparts, and you can usually sell them for a couple dollars, and collectors covet these things both for the design and also for their silver content. Whether you find one of these Bobcat quarters coin roll hunting, at a flea market, or in your family coin collection, you're holding a valuable and historic piece of numismatic art, and if you happen to find one with the nickel composition, you are holding a true Canadian Holy Grail coin. Now, before we get into the values for these nickel Bobcat quarters, some of the details and specifications of any of these are off and may indicate that you do not have a legitimate example. First, I'm going to discuss the details and specifications for the regular silver issues of the 1967 Bobcat quarters. The overall mintage for the 1967 Bobcat quarter is 48,855,500, and that includes both the 80% and 50% silver compositions. They will be non-magnetic if they are composed of silver. The silver versions will have a weight of 5.83 grams, a diameter of 23.88 millimeters. The edge will be reeded, they will have a diaxis and metal alignment as is the standard for most Canadian, British, and Australian coins. The obverse was designed and engraved by Arnold Mockin and the reverse by Alex Colville. Now the details and specifications for the Holy Grail nickel composition 1967 Bobcat Quarter. It is designated with a code DC34. It has a composition of nickel. It should be magnetic. It has a lower weight of 5.07 grams as opposed to the 5.83 grams of the silver version. So that is one of the differentiating factors, is the lower weight. The nickel version should have a diameter of 23.62 millimeters, which is slightly lower than the silver version. Its diaxis will be in metal alignment. The obverse was designed by Arnold Mockin and the reverse by Alex Colville. Now, if you were to find one of the nickel versions of these coins and send it into a grading company, it would be designated with a specimen designation, meaning it will get an SP. Now, because this coin gets an SP designation, it means more than likely it is a pattern or test piece. So when they actually made this coin, they probably only made a few of them, and they were testing out the nickel planchettes because they're going to be implementing them in the next couple years for general circulation. So either the mint made a few of these as a pattern or test, or a few nickel planchettes accidentally slipped into the presses when they were making the 1967 Bobcat quarters. But if you do send one of these in to be graded with the nickel composition, it will get an SP designation. Now, in terms of value, if you find a regular 1967 specimen Bobcat quarter, just to give you guys a comparison, it can be worth around $50 on the high end if you find one that's in incredible condition. Now, if you find one that is composed of nickel, it can be worth around $3,000 for an SP62. If you find one that's pretty beat up and worn, you're probably still going to get at least $500 to $1,000 for it. The fact that there are only a few known examples adds to the value and rarity of this coin, and people will want them even if it's an extremely worn example. Now, on the high end, it can be worth around $7,000 currently for an SP64 example. If you were to find one and it graded any higher, you could see some massive price jumps. You could easily be talking a $15,000 to $20,000 coin. This is one of the rarest Canadian quarters that you can find still in your pocket change. There have been 4 or 5 accounted for, but that doesn't mean that there still aren't a few floating out there. So definitely keep your eyes on your pocket change, or if you are coin roll hunting, because you never know if you are holding a coin that is only worth 25 cents or $25,000. The Canadian Tuni is a $2 coin that was first introduced by the Canadian Mint in the year 1996, replacing the $2 Canadian banknote. It represented a step towards modernizing Canada's currency system and was celebrated for its practicality and durability compared to the previous paper currency. The decision to replace the $2 banknote was primarily driven by the high production costs and the short lifespan of paper money. The Tuni quickly became a staple of Canadian currency, loved for both its unique design and also its cultural resonance. The Tuni is a 2-metal coin with an inner core made of an aluminum bronze alloy and an outer ring composed of a nickel brass alloy. The coin's design features a polar bear on the reverse, which was created by artist Brent Townsend, and the effigy of Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse, and now it is King Charles III. The original polar bear design was selected from over 6,000 entries and submissions, and the Tuni's design is supposed to reflect upon Canada's natural heritage and innovative spirit. Counterfeit $2 coins have been circulating across Canada in recent years. Identifying these fakes can be pretty straightforward if you know what to look for. Key features such as the coin's appearance, weight, design flaws, and subtle differences in the manufacturing process can provide clues to help you distinguish counterfeit coins from genuine examples. Genuine Tunies minted between 1996 and 2011 weigh approximately 7.31 grams, while counterfeit versions from this period often weigh slightly less, around 6.99 grams. This small weight discrepancy is due to the lower quality materials and manufacturing processes used to produce these counterfeit coins. These fake coins exhibit several noticeable design errors which can help differentiate from legitimate tunies. First, you want to look at the polar bear side, which is the reverse of the coin. The polar bear's paw on fake coins often features a split toe design, resembling a camel's hoof rather than a paw. The queen's nose on fake coins is often too sharp or elongated, deviating from the official design. Counterfeiters frequently replicate certain years for Canadian tunies, the most notable being 1996, 2002, 2004, 2005, 2006, and 2012. If you do have a Canadian toonie from one of those years, it's worth examining closely for any of the aforementioned flaws. In most cases these days, if you do find any extremely rare coin, whether it be an error or variety, or maybe it has a very low mintage figure, you definitely want to make sure all of the technical specifications are correct, because people will counterfeit rare Canadian coins and sell them as replicas for only a few dollars on sites like AliExpress and Temu without the correct replica marks or stamps on the coin. Many counterfeit tunies are believed to originate overseas, particularly in China, where low production costs make the illicit activity profitable. These fakes are often mass-produced and imported from China into Canada. In one notable incident, a Quebec man by the name of Jean-François Genreau was convicted of importing over 26,000 fake Canadian counterfeit tunies, which he ordered directly from a Chinese manufacturer. This counterfeit variety gained its name due to the distinct paw design on the polar bear, and thus was referred to as the camel toe counterfeit tunies. Collectors and consumers who wish to see the detailed images of known counterfeit tunies can visit online resources such as bmjw.ca, which is the Counterfeit Tunies catalog created by coin collector Brent Mackey. This catalog highlights the distinguishing features of various counterfeit coins and provides visual references to help with identification. Among the millions of legitimate 1996 tunies that were minted, a unique variety known as the Beaded Tuni stands out as one of the rarest and most valuable modern Canadian coins. Only 4 examples of this coin are currently known to exist. What sets this coin apart from the standard issue 1996 tunies is a beaded border rim that is distinct around the outside of both sides of the coin, differentiating it from the standard 1996 design. The origins of the beaded border tuni remain a mystery currently, but some theories suggest that it was an experimental pattern, which is an early version of the coin that was later cancelled, with most of the examples most likely being melted down. PCGS classifies it as a test token, but no concrete historical evidence actually supports this classification. In September of 2021, a beaded tuni graded as almost uncirculated sold at auction for 4,700 Canadian dollars, with additional fees bringing the total to approximately 4,100 US dollars. Its rarity and enigmatic history make it a prized possession among collectors and add an incredible layer of intrigue to Canadian numismatics. While most 1996 tunies are not considered rare due to the high mintage figure of approximately 28 million, varieties like the beaded border tuni or the 1996 German planchette offer significant value. Collecting tunies can be an enjoyable and potentially rewarding hobby if you know what to look for, especially with the rise in popularity of coin roll hunting in Canada. You should always keep an eye out for rare varieties in your pocket change or in customer-wrapped bankrolls. Who knows, you might uncover a hidden treasure or gem that could be worth the big bucks. To identify the 1996 beaded border tuni, you need to carefully examine the rim of the coin on both sides. Unlike standard 1996 Canadian tunies, which have a smooth rim transitioning into the edge, the beaded border tuni will feature a distinct series of small raised beads encircling the outer edge on both the obverse and reverse side of the coin. These beads are evenly spaced and provide a textured border that stands out against the flat rim or background of the standard issue coins. You want to look closely at the rim of the coin under good lighting. The beads will appear as a uniform rim of small raised dots that are clearly separate from the rest of the coin's design. You can also run your finger gently along the edge of the coin. On the beaded border tuni, you should be able to feel the textured beads that would not be present on the standard issue coins. If possible, you can also compare it with a standard 1996 tuni. The difference in the rim's appearance and texture will be quite noticeable, with the standard coin having the smooth transition into the edge without any of the raised beads. You can also use a magnifying glass or zoom in with the camera on your phone closely to examine the rim of the coin. The details of the beaded border will be much easier to identify under magnification. Apart from the beaded border, the rest of the coin's design, including Queen Elizabeth II's effigy on the obverse and the polar bear on the reverse, should be exactly the same as standard Canadian planchette 1996 tunies. However, the presence of these beads is the definitive feature that sets this rare coin apart. The Canadian tuni is more than just a $2 coin. It's a symbol of innovation, practicality, and cultural identity. From its inception to its current form, it has evolved alongside Canadian society, reflecting its changing needs and priorities. The 1996 beaded border tuni, with its unmatched rarity and mysterious origins, stands out as a testament to the allure of Canadian numismatics. As the world moves forward towards digital transactions, the tuni remains a tangible reminder of Canada's rich economic history. So whether you are a seasoned collector, a curious enthusiast, or a coin roll hunter, you should definitely keep an eye out on your pocket change, because you might just find a rare piece of history and also be able to make yourself some big money. Now, before we finish this video off, some of the details and specifications for the 1996 Canadian tunis. If any of these are off, it may indicate that you do not have a legitimate example. I'm going to give you guys the specifications for the Canadian planchette 1996 tunis, so the beaded border tuni should be bang on with these specifications. The overall mintage for the Canadian planchette 1996 tuni is 315,483,000. 1996 tunis that were struck on a German planchette have much lower mintage figures. There were only around 10 million of the German planchette tunis minted in 1996, and if you can find and identify one of those and it is in good condition, you can make some pretty good money on those. I'm going to be covering the German planchette and some of the other 1996 varieties in a future video, so make sure to hit that bell notification so you don't miss out when I drop those. Now, the outer ring should be composed of 100% nickel. The inner core should be composed of 92% copper, 6% aluminum, and 2% nickel. It should have a weight of 7.3 grams, a diameter of 28 millimeters, a thickness of 1.8 millimeters. The edge of the coin should be serrated, and it should have a die axis in metal alignment, which is the standard for Canadian, British, and Australian coins. So a brief history on this coin. After the death of King Edward VII in the year 1910, his son King George V became the new king of Canada. His portrait was added to the obverse of coins minted in Canada from that point onward until his death in 1936. The first batch of coins issued during the reign of King George V did not have the abbreviation of DEI-GRA, which stands for By the Grace of God, in his title. This caused a lot of controversy, and the phrase was eventually added back. The first Canadian silver $1 coin was officially issued in the year 1935 to commemorate King George V's Silver Jubilee. This coin has the famous Courrier de Bois design and is nicknamed the Voyager dollar. So let's get into some of the reasons why the 1948 Canadian silver dollar is so incredibly rare and valuable. Now, this all actually starts in the year 1947. In 1947, the coins of King George VI had the inscription of George VI 6 DG REX ET IND IMP. I'm not going to include all the colons and dashes in there, but I will put it into the text, which meant George VI, by the grace of God, King and Emperor of India. For those of you that didn't know, India was actually part of the British Empire, very similar to Canada and Australia, up until the year 1947 when they gained independence. When India became independent that year, the title of Emperor of India had to be removed from coins produced for the British Empire in the future. Despite this, there is still a need for coinage, so while waiting for the new tools and matrices to arrive from the Royal Mint, they decided to strike coins with the date of 1947, but with a maple leaf symbol added to indicate that it was actually struck in the year 1948. They did this for all of the different coin denominations, and there was a little maple leaf placed to the bottom right hand side of the 7. For some of the different denominations, there's also a few notable varieties. Now, what do you say we get into the coin that we all came here for, the King of Canadian Coins, or the King of Silver Dollars, as it is commonly referred to as? The 1948 King George VI Canadian dollar is an extremely highly sought after coin in Canadian numismatics. It is the rarest and most valuable regular issue coin in the series of Canadian silver dollars minted from 1935 to 1967. This coin has an extremely limited mintage and holds a significant place in Canadian coin history. The 1948 silver dollar looks similar, if not identical, to the other King George VI silver dollar coins of the era, except for the date 1948 is the only thing that makes it stand out and adds the value to the coin. It only has a silver content of 80%. It is not even made of sterling silver like some of the earlier Canadian coinage. The obverse of the coin was designed by T.H. Paget, while its reverse was designed by Emmanuel Hahn and features a Canadian voyager and Native American cruising in a canoe under the northern lights on an evergreen traced lake. However, there is one minor and important change that affected the 1948 Canadian dollars. Production of the Canadian dollar was suspended in the year 1940 due to Canada's involvement in World War II. When the war ended in 1945, there was social upheaval and brewing in India, which was still under British rule. India gained independence on August 15, 1947, which affected the production of Canadian dollars. The new dies reflecting India's independence had not yet been prepared at the Royal Canadian Mint, so production of 1947 dated coinage continued into the year 1948, with those predated silver dollars containing that small maple leaf to the bottom right-hand side of the 7. Now, although the 1947 Canadian silver dollars can be extremely rare and valuable depending on which variety you have and also the grade, the Canadian Mint didn't start producing silver dollars with the date of 1948 until about halfway through the year. Also, once they received the new equipment and dies to start producing the new coins, there was a delay in production which affected the overall number of coins made. Only 18,780 1948 Canadian silver dollars were ever produced, including a few special coins made in specimen sets as well. Even coins that have been circulated or scrubbed with steel wool are extremely rare and can still fetch $1,000 today, even in the worst conditions. So some of the specifications for this coin, if any of these are off, it might indicate that it is a counterfeit. When a coin is usually this rare and has such a limited mintage, it will usually be pretty common for counterfeits to be produced, and I can guarantee you there has been a fair number of 1948 Canadian silver dollar counterfeits produced over the years. If they're pumping out the Canadian Tuni in counterfeits, then they have definitely made a few of these and tried to pass them off and sell them at coin shops or maybe pawn shops over the years. But the specifications for the 1948 Canadian silver dollar, it is composed of 80% silver. It has a portrait of King George VI on the obverse of the coin. It should have a weight of 23.33 grams, a diameter of 36.06 millimeters, a thickness of 2.8 millimeters. It is in metal alignment like all Canadian coins come. The shape is round and the edge is reeded. Now let's discuss the values for what has to be definitely one of the most valuable silver dollars, not only in Canada, but the entire world. This can be worth a lot of money, even on the low end. The 1948 Canadian silver dollar can fetch you a minimum of $588 if it scores a VG8, which is basically the bottom of the Sheldon scale. So that is a coin that has seen a fair amount of wear and circulation and has been put through the meat grinder, and you can still get almost $600 for it. If you guys are ever wondering where to sell your coins, my suggestion is to find your nearest local coin shop, take your coins in to be appraised there. I get asked that all the time. Where can I sell my coins? If I have this coin, who will buy it off of me? Local coin shops are the best option to go, or auction sites are another good option. Now, on the high end, the 1948 Canadian silver dollar can be worth $2,220 for an MS-60 example. And this bad boy can be worth all the way up to $61,700 for an MS-66, which, as we know right now, is the highest graded example. If you're able to find one of these and it did get the MS-67 attribution, you could easily be talking a $100,000 coin. Now, the Canadian Mint did not officially start producing proof sets until the year 1953, so there are no Canadian 1948 silver proof-like dollars, but they did produce specimen sets in the year 1948. These 1948 specimen dollars are extremely rare and valuable, but not nearly as valuable as the circulation silver dollars. So if you aren't picky and you're looking to fill out a hole in your collection, the Canadian 1948 specimen silver dollar might be a great option, and honestly the finish and strike quality on it is usually much better than the circulation strikes anyways, so you're honestly paying less money for a better coin in terms of the 1948 specimen silver dollar. In terms of value, it can be worth around $2,500 for a specimen 60 example, which is on the low end of the SP scale. It can be worth around $4,900 for an SP63 example, and all the way up to $13,500 for an SP66. If it got the SP67 designation, it could easily push $20,000. If it got a cameo attribution as well, could definitely add a premium to the coin. So in conclusion, the 1948 Canadian silver dollar is not only one of the most rare and valuable dollar coins in Canada, but it may actually be one of the most legendary coins in all of Canadian numismatics. What are your thoughts on this coin? What would you do if you think you found a legit example, or if you already own one? Let me know down in the comments. Also, if you guys would smash that thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and also hit that bell notification so you can follow along with my new videos as they are being released. I would like to thank you all so much for watching. But until the next one, everybody, peace out and have a good one, y'all.